إن الحمد لله نحمده سبحانه وتعالى ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. الحمد لله الذي أعزنا بالإسلام وأي عز بعد الإسلام. الحمد لله الذي أنزل إلينا القرآن وجعله فرقانا وتبيانا لكل شيء. الحمد لله الذي أرسل لنا خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله الصادق الأمين. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا وقائدنا وقدوتنا محمد بقدر حبك فيه وبقدر ما أنزلت عليه من كتابك الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد. Today's topic, inshallah, is about answering the question of whether it makes sense, whether it's meaningful for Muslims and other people of good conscience to participate in the voting process, or it is a meaningless thing and we should just avoid it. This is the main topic. But before we get into that, I want to send a message to the students who are mobilizing across the country against the genocide in Gaza and against our governments and other institutions' shameful support of that genocide. These students are exercising their rights to free speech and assembly, among other rights, and they are experiencing a hateful campaign of false propaganda against their goals and efforts, and experiencing a backlash from university administrations and elected officials, and sometimes experiencing brutality at the hands of law enforcement. Contrary to what the false propaganda is trying to convey, these students are very diverse. They are pro-peace, pro-justice, and they include many Jewish brothers and sisters. The message to those beautiful, courageous souls is, we see you, we hear you, we support the good that you are trying to do, and we are hopeful because of you. Stay strong and stay principled. Continue to speak truth to power and keep cooler heads, and this is very important, by not engaging with instigators who are trying to catch you doing something wrong to tarnish the image of the entire movement. This khutbah is actually for you too, even if you're not Muslim. Protesting and rallying sometimes is essential, like it is now. But we need additional action to build up on that in order to even be more strategic and more effective, which takes us to the topic of today's khutbah. Should American Muslims and other people of good conscience vote, or it is a meaningless action? To answer that question correctly, we must answer a different question first. Are we commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to achieve success, or we are commanded to do our part in sincerity? So of course, the answer everyone here knows, we are only commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do what we can. The result of the act is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree, not in our hands. We just need to do our part in sincerity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3 of the Quran, verse 110, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. You are the best community ever raised to humanity. Why, O Allah? You mentioned that there were chosen people. Why are we the best ummah ever created? The answer didn't even say because. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't, in the Arabic Quran, the original Quran, didn't say because you were doing. No. Automatically, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. You are the best community ever raised to humanity. تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You encourage good, forbid evil, and believe in Allah. There is no separation. This is the reason that we are the best ummah if we apply these rules and commands. So we are only judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the combination of our intention, our sincerity, and the action that we do. It's not enough to say, I'm a believer. I have to do something to prove it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first before anybody else. So if we are sincere in our action and do our part as best as we can, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us the reward regardless of the result of the action. We are not required to achieve the result. So just do your part with sincerity. When a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with a camel, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke before about tawakkul, having trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this man came and said, I have my camel. Should I tie the camel to the palm tree, or have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect the camel for me? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you know the hadith, أعقلها وتوكل. Tie the camel and have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do your part, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do the rest. Sometimes the result is not what we want, and that's fine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has wisdom, has reasons for it. It could be a test for us. It could be so many different scenarios. It could be the result will be delayed in this dunya, or we will get the reward in the hereafter. Again, we have to do our part. We have also, as the hadith spoke, al-akhd bil-asbab, to adopt means to achieve the results. Not any means. We have to apply our moral principles, Islamic principles and morals in what we do. So let's talk about the Declaration of Independence of the United States. The very famous phrase from that is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, humans, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these, meaning among those rights, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is what the forefathers, who did a revolution against the rule of King George of Britain, declaring independence from the British Crown, they said this as the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution of the United States has amendments to it, which is called the Bill of Rights. The first amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. In layman's term, this is the freedom of speech that we keep hearing about. The government should not curtail your freedom of speech. That doesn't apply to private entities or private individuals. You cannot come to my house, for example, and doing something that I don't want you to do. That's my private property. But the government should not curtail your freedom of speech. If you haven't done so, take time to read the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. When I did study them, I took a full-day course. I realized and recognized that a lot of it has relations to Islamic principles, the maxims of Sharia. Among the maxims of Sharia are the preservation of life, liberty, and property. Exactly what the forefathers said. There are other maxims, but that's among them. So now the separation of church and state is that term comes from that First Amendment. And that separation means that the government should not prop up, support one religion over the other, and should not suppress one religion over the other. Treat everybody equally. Okay? That separation is a good thing in this country because it allows us and other people of different faith to live in peace and treated fairly on paper by the government. Okay? But that separation does not mean that we Muslims lose our moral compass. We cannot lose our GPS. What is our GPS? It's Islamic teachings, morals, and principles. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to uphold al-adl wal-ihsan, which are basically the moral positions of Islam. Otherwise, what happens when nobody encourages good and forbid evil? Society, morality decays and collapses. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8 of the Quran, ayah 73, إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ كَبِيرٌ. Unless you do it, there would be a lot of oppression and corruption on earth and great mischief. One of the ways to uphold that commandment is to vote in line with those morals and principles that we have. Because if you say, I will not engage, then you're basically abdicating your responsibility to encourage good and forbid evil. Some Muslims have the opinion that engaging is un-Islamically, it is unacceptable Islamically. That's a valid opinion, but it's a minority opinion. It's okay. If you don't want to participate, it's okay. What we're trying to explain here is, especially in a place like the United States, the government does not prop up a certain group over the other, or should not. If a group does not participate what is happening here, you're allowing other groups to determine for you how your life would be. So for example, we want to build a mosque in a certain area in New Jersey. Oh, no, you can't, because what? We cannot allow you to have that many parking spots. You don't have enough parking. Remember Masjid al-Falah a few years ago? They were refused because of that, and then they won a lawsuit, and now they have, mashallah, a big, beautiful masjid in a different spot. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reasons, but it didn't happen on its own. Muslims and other people of good conscience worked together in order to get that to happen. With the current climate, which has been deteriorating for a long time, what we're witnessing now didn't happen overnight. The deterioration was going on for decades. With the erosion of rights, by voting with our moral principles, we are actually defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. When we see elected officials completely subservient to the evils of a foreign government, we have a duty to stand up, not only as Muslims, but as Americans, to do our part in correcting those wrongs. You're not only doing this for Gaza, you're not only doing it for this year, you're doing it for the United States and for the world, for the future to come. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Make dua, inshallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم. اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. So now, after establishing the reasons for why it makes sense, it is better for us, it is actually the right thing to do to be engaged and not let others decide for you how your life will be. How do we deal with it, particularly in this year? Since October 7, we have witnessed the genocide in Gaza. We have witnessed American elected officials almost completely subservient to the whims of a foreign government, in support or in silence about what's happening. And that's not acceptable. That's immoral, that's unjust, and all people of good conscience need to participate and try to correct the wrong. Okay, so what to do? How do we do good election? The point here is, if there is an elected official or a candidate that spoke in support, and you know how it is when you see it, of the genocide, if they do not correct their position morally, principally, strongly, then they will not get the vote. They should not get our vote. End of story. If someone is not only silent, but like some in Congress who are voting to send more money to the same army that is killing more than 35,000 and committing genocide on live TV and bragging about it, how is it that we're going to let them go without doing our part in punishing them politically? I want to take a tangent here for a second. This khutbah does not represent the views of the institution of the masjid. This is a personal opinion. The masjid is a 501c3 organization, does not engage in political or partisan politics. So, as a human being with hopefully, inshallah, a good moral conscience, as a Muslim, it is my duty to vet the candidates who will be on my ballot and determine if they deserve my vote or not. And not only that, I need to organize, because if we're not doing it, who's going to do it? And if we're not doing it now, when are we going to do it? In New Jersey, the primary for president and Congress and US Senate and other offices is going to be on June 4th. If you're not registered to vote, you should register to vote, because we need more numbers of us to be participating and voicing our objection to what is going on. Choosing who to vote for will be a group process. There are Muslim organizations and non-Muslim organizations that are vetting the candidates. Before the election, you will receive so many different notifications about who to vote for. We are talking about creating a political education club in our area so we can focus on locally on our own area. So there are so many things. Don't worry about who to vote for, but if you know something about a candidate, share it with us. If you saw, for example, a mayor or a congressperson or this and that in support of Gaza, share it with us so we know those opinions. The other thing I want to touch upon very fast is, historically, at least since 9/11, the Muslim community almost always voted for what is known as the lesser evil. We had George Bush as president, and Muslims voted in large numbers. The majority of Muslims voted for George W. Bush in the 2000 elections, particularly in Florida, where the difference between him and Al Gore tipped the balance towards George Bush. Without the Muslim vote in Florida, George Bush wouldn't have been president. What happened after 9/11? We all know what happened. So we have no real friends unless we can exercise political leverage. The point is, we may not elect someone who will do the right thing now, but we are building collective power for peace and justice. What is good for us Muslims is good for everybody else, because that's our morals and our principles. So we're creating political leverage in order to shift the needle towards a better direction, maybe not this year, but for the future. But if we don't start now or yesterday, we'll never get anywhere. And again, the result is not in our hands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides what the result is. We have to do our part in sincerity. Inshallah, whatever we do, we have to be mindful that we're not only doing it for this life. We always have to have the thought and the mentality that we're building for the hereafter, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on us and save us from hellfire and all punishment in this life and in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in the highest degree in Jannah with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. آمين. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما وأقم الصلاة.